The main suspect in the latest propaganda video by the so-called Islamic State is thought to be a British man named Siddhartha Dhar. He stars in the video. He's holding a gun. He goes on to mock Prime Minister David Cameron for daring to challenge the might of the Islamic State. He then appears to execute a man who's kneeling down in front of him. Well, fun fact about Siddhartha, or Sid as we'll call him, he used to be a moon bounce salesman back in Britain. Jose, you know those things that people rent out for their children's birthday? You go inside and you can bounce all around. I think it's in England referred to as a bouncy castle. So if anyone watching in the UK knows what we're talking about here. There also was that young boy in the video. He was identified right away because his grandfather is still in the UK and he said, "That's my grandson." But now we know who this main man is. His name is Siddhartha. Strange name for jihadist. Let's call him Sid. So this is what's most interesting to me. We're going to talk about David Cameron's thoughts on this whole video because he has responded. But one really important thing to me here is that Siddhartha was actually detained. He was arrested in the UK on charges. He was suspected of encouraging terrorism. He was involved with all sorts of terrorist groups back in the UK, and then that's when he was radicalized. He was arrested. He was put on bail because they didn't have enough proof on the guy. And then while he was on bail waiting his trial, he left and he fled for Syria. So now a lot of people are, putting the police under fire saying, well, you guys had this guy in your custody, you were suspicious of him, and then you put him on bail and you don't even take away his passport?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is not the first time it happens. British intelligence services and the police have been under fire before for other cases of people that have been able to travel after being either interrogated or detained. They are not the only ones. If we recall a little bit, even the United States has incurred in this type of efforts at a higher, errors at a higher level, like the case of Abu al-Baghdadi. We had him prisoner in Iraq, and then we let him go, and he became the leader of ISIS. So it's hard, although these intelligence agencies, they work hard, and most likely they are pretty effective 80–90% of the time, it's almost impossible to be sure that if you allow someone to go on bail, they are not going to flee. And that's why you will take their passport away, especially at a moment where terrorism is such a high concern and you already are suspected of him getting involved or being radicalized. So it's definitely a fail, but you have to be careful.
You're right, it's tricky. But I mean, you know what else is tricky? Putting out numbers like 80–90%. It could be 99%. It could be much less because they go and then we never hear back from them again. We only find out when they're identified in some crazy propaganda video like this, right? And that's exactly what his response was. I'm talking about Prime Minister David Cameron. He said this should be seen as nothing other than propaganda, and he's saying that it actually shows their weakness right now. He said this is an organization that's losing territory, it's losing ground, and it's increasingly losing anybody's sympathy. I don't know who had their sympathy in the first place, but he's saying, the fact that they're putting out these new videos using different tools, using a toddler, for example, right? Using a new Jihadi John, he's been dubbed, is kind of showing their weakness now because we've seen them losing a lot of territory in Iraq. The Prime Minister of Iraq has come out and said that 2016 wants that to be the year where they're completely out of his country. So we see the tides are definitely turning, but then they put out these propaganda videos to kind of show the opposite of that. And that's what David Cameron is saying. Don't take this for what they say. This is quite literally the exact opposite.
And I agree. I think that ISIS is entering into a new phase of existence where they are really hurting of all the military action taken against them from different countries, France, Russia, Turkey, the US-led coalition. They have been piling up. They lost, according to the latest Obama numbers, they said that they lost 40% of the territory that they once held, maybe more at this point. But we do see that instead of trying to fight domestically, fight on the territory that they traditionally occupy, they've been doing the attacks like Paris. They've been doing international attacks and putting more propaganda to maintain the fear, because that's what it makes them successful. It's what makes them even appealing to some of those who feel rejected in the West. The propaganda. That idea that we are powerful enough to create the fear on the people, but we really are losing the battle in real life.
And every time, although it's meant to be taken as a good thing, every time I hear, the talk about how successful the airstrikes are against them in cooperation with ground forces as well, it's always a bittersweet feeling for me because I know that with every airstrike we lose so many civilians too. And
the displacement.
And the displacement, not to mention the buildings and the houses that are destroyed as well, that goes along with the lives, of course. So this is what we know for now. Siddhartha was at one point radicalized in the UK. He has been identified as the new Jihadi John, and one point was in custody by the British police.